Are you looking for a new math curriculum? Well, CTC Math specializes in providing online video tutorials that take a multi-sensory approach to learning. Favorably reviewed in Kathy Duffy's 102 Top Picks and the Old Schoolhouse Crew Review. The lessons are short and concise to help your children break down concepts and appreciate math in a whole new way. The lessons are taught the traditional way, not to the test. Each one of the video tutorials is taught by an internationally acclaimed teacher, Pat Murray, who is renowned for teaching math concepts in a simple, easy-to-understand way and in only a few minutes at a time. Using a multi-sensory approach, having the combination of effective graphics and animation synchronized with the voice of a friendly teacher together with practical assessment, even students who struggled with math are getting fantastic results. And the ones that were doing okay before now are doing brilliantly. Visit CTC Math today and start your free trial. That's ctcmath.com.
This is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network. Welcome to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Your host, Felice is an author, a publisher, and your radio show host. She will encourage, educate, and inspire you with answers to your most pressing questions from homeschool, marriage, parenting, and much more. Felice loves to equip moms to live a Christian life because every moment counts. Be sure to visit her website at mediaangels.com. And here's your host, Felice Gerwitz.
Hey friends, and welcome. Well, there are many educational philosophies in general, but not many for homeschooling. Homeschooling for excellence is a way to encourage your children to grow and excel in the homeschool environment. And in this podcast, I'm going to share some tips for successful outcomes in your homeschool journey. Well, welcome. My name is Felice Gerwitz, and this is an episode of Vintage Homeschool Moms. Today, our topic is Homeschooling for Excellence. This is episode 530, and you can find today's show notes at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com. Also want to give a shout out to our sponsor, CTC Math. It is due to sponsors that help us bring you quality homeschool-focused podcasts and great curriculum providers like ctcmath.com. In fact, my grandkids are currently doing CTC Math, and they really enjoy it. All right, so you're asking, how am I going to homeschool for excellence when I can barely get my teens up in the morning, and yet the younger ones are up before dawn? Well, it can happen, but it takes a homeschool for excellence mindset. It's a way we think about homeschooling. And I know no one wants to be told about how to homeschool their kids. I get that. We are homeschool parents, and we are very strong-willed and independent people. Ask me how I know. We are, in essence, swimming against the current, and it would be easier in a sense if we could just send our kids off in the morning and let someone else deal with their education. But many of us have tried that, and at what cost? We live in a society today that has shocked us to the core, especially when the curtain was pulled back in 2020 and 2021. Many parents have not recovered from this shock, and in fact, there was a huge exodus from public school education to homeschooling at that time. And many of you that are listening are probably some of the parents that decided to continue homeschooling, and for that I applaud you. But what is excellence in school education? We found that not only was excellence not even on the radar of the school system, but a perverse undertone of evil was in the process of grooming our children and continues today. Parents who were totally opposed to this and in the dark about what the schools were teaching were shocked. Parental rights were being taken away, and the injustice and hurt was due in part to the fact that the very teachers that parents trusted basically betrayed them. The parents trusted their children's education to a system that was infiltrated by woke ideology that pervades in our world today. Now eyes are opened and no one wants to go back to a mediocre school system that gives lip service to true education. Friends, I was in that system. I taught in a system for 2 years. My goal was to become principal of a school and to change education. And yet, when I found myself in the system, which was in the late 70s, I learned that it was all about outcomes, yes, but we had to be careful of what we taught. Now I find that that has gone astray. I also learned when I tried to deal with the school system with my own children that it wasn't anywhere I wanted them to be. Homeschooling for excellence involves how we regard our homeschool journey. Here's a short list of reasons why people homeschool, and I'm sure you could add to this list and maybe, disagree with me on some of these. So many people homeschool because of faith, because they don't like what's being taught in the public schools, or because private and Christian schools are too expensive. Maybe you have a struggling learner that needs additional help, and that's why you want to homeschool. Or maybe your child's been bullied. There's also a desire to teach your children with a flexible schedule. Now, one of the things I didn't mention in this list was having a desire to teach children your values and your virtues. And one of the things, and the reasons I left it off the list, is that to me would be a given. There are many reasons why people homeschool, and I started because of my educational background, which was in special needs and elementary and early childhood education. And my struggling learner did not fit into the private school mold. My experience with teaching left me in a state of there was no way I was putting my kids in school, especially in public education. It was not an option for me. And after spending 2 years in what I considered a broken system that failed kids, I decided that I was going to put my kids in a private school, and then I changed my focus when that wasn't working either and didn't provide for my son's needs. Over the years, my emphasis changed to a faith focus. As a Catholic, it was important to me that my children not only learned our faith, what it meant to be a Christian, and also how to have values that exemplified our Christian faith. I also had to sit down and look at questions that I needed to answer before I could homeschool for excellence. The first was, what were my goals? What was my vision for my homeschool year? What were my expectations? And were my expectations reasonable? And I found out that some years they were not. And the last was, okay, so I have these goals and these things I want to do. How am I going to get it done? Excellence is a state of mind. It is how we see our homeschool journey going, and it is how we expect our children to succeed, and actually letting them know that we are homeschooling for excellence. I don't want you to just be mediocre. I want you to be the best you can be. Being the best you can be does not necessarily mean you are the best by the world's standards, but you are the best that you can be with what you've been equipped with and how you handle what you've been given. Years ago, a family came out of nowhere and wrote a book, Homeschooling for Excellence, and I have some links as well as updates on the family in the show notes. Again, that's at vintagehomeschoolmoms.com, Homeschooling for Excellence, episode 530. Anyway, this family wrote this book, and several of their kids went to Ivy League colleges, and this set off a firestorm, for lack of a better word, among homeschoolers. Everyone wanted to be like this family. People wrote to them, and this family was essentially put on a pedestal. And I watched an interview with the family at the time, and they were basically surprised at all the attention. Why was this so amazing? Because excellence and success in the outcome results of homeschooling were unheard of at that time. Sure, people were homeschooling, but either they were homeschooling quietly because at that point we were still trying to negotiate laws of homeschooling, or they were homeschooling and had just started. My kids were fairly young at this time. And so here was an example of homeschooling that worked. At this time, I was a conference speaker, and I was approached by countless parents about my homeschool philosophy. But more important to me and more telling was a question I was asked over and over again. And the question was this: do you want your children to attend an Ivy League school? Is that your goal? And my answer surprised them. My answer was no. That was not my goal. My goal for success was well-rounded kids who had a good educational foundation, who loved the Lord and their family, and who demonstrated good character and a virtuous life. They were shocked. Why wasn't I, a conference speaker who had the podium, not interested in having an Ivy League school as my goal? Excellence doesn't necessarily mean by the world's standards. And even with what I wanted from my family, well-rounded kids, good educational foundation, children who loved the Lord and their family and who demonstrated good character and a virtuous life, I wasn't 100% successful. But I gave my children the tools that they needed, and it was up to them to succeed. Sure, 3 of my kids graduated from college, their faith intact and strong, which is saying a lot, with Magnum Cum Laude and Cum Laude honors. 2 of these children were struggling learners at one time. One of my sons, who didn't go to college, is an entrepreneur who's highly successful, and the other is currently a Lyft driver who's kind and courteous to his customers and has a 5-star rating. Yet no family is perfect. Homeschooling for excellence does not mean all of our children are a success by the world's standards, only the standards we set out as parents. Can I say that again? Homeschooling for excellence does not mean all of our children are a success by the world's standards, only by the standards we set as parents. Friends, here's what I found in my own homeschool journey. And I've talked to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, if not thousands of people through the years in my 12 years of being a conference speaker and all the years of podcasting, which I'm going on 11 years for this one podcast. I found that it starts with us. It starts with us, the parents, the caregivers, and those who want our children to be successful. It starts with aunts and uncles and grandparents. I'm a grandparent now, and I have an amazing job. And my job is to reaffirm the great work my daughter is doing and to encourage her, even if I don't agree 100% with how she's managing her household or her homeschooling. I'm to encourage her and her family. How do we approach our homeschool? How do you approach your homeschool? What do you expect out of your children? Do we expect our kids to be the best they can be, or do we just want to get through the day so we can throw in a load of laundry at the end? What is the solution for homeschooling with excellence? That's a question that you have to answer, but I'm going to supply it with a very simplistic response. The solution is what you expect and how you follow through. The solution is to expect that your children will excel and have the goals explained to each of them. The best way I can explain this to you is giving you an example of my own homeschooling. I realized early on that my children were super bright, but they were struggling with reading, spelling, and one of them with the retention of math skills. Yet I didn't throw up my hands and make accommodations for them and say, oh, well, because you can't add, here's a calculator, or because you can't read, don't worry, I'll just read it to you. Sure, there is a place for that, but I wanted them to overcome these learning obstacles. I expected them to learn and to do well. Did it take a longer time than maybe your average homeschool kid? Sure. Or a longer time than your public school kid? Sure. But we made progress, and that's what I looked for. I found a curriculum that worked and we used it. And when it didn't work, I used something else. I used a hands-on approach, and we had many, many field trips that reinforced what we were studying and learning. Basically, it was experiential learning. My children excelled and looked forward at times to homeschooling. Not always, but at times. And they knew what was expected. And they also knew what would happen if what was expected was not fulfilled. The key is expectation, and I know I'm being repetitive, but it works. I'm going to give you an example with how I've handled my grandkids, okay? My grandchildren can be a handful at times. There's 9 of them in one family, and I love having them spend the night. And I usually have the boys spend the night and then the girls spend the night. But now that the older 2 are working part-time and the older 2 boys were off on a retreat, I had the younger 4. And so my daughter said, "Are you sure about this?" And I said, "Of course, I can handle this." And so we spent half a day together, and then I took ages 11 to 5, 3 boys and 1 girl for the evening, and then the entire next day. And the first thing I did in the car as we were driving home was I explained my expectations. And I often talked about myself in the third person. For example, Grandma expects you to listen when I talk and to follow the rules. If you want to go outside, you're going to have to ask me. If you want to go swimming, I need to be with you. I also expect you to be kind to each other, and I don't want any yelling and screaming. And I want you to put your stuff in your rooms and the rooms where you're going to be sleeping. And then I asked them, what do I expect you to do? And the different kids, said different things. And the quietest of them all doesn't say a lot. So I singled him out and I asked him some specific questions. And he knew what I expected. And then I said, well, what happens if you don't do what I asked? And they said, you're probably going to call Mom and have her pick us up. And I said, that's right. That is a threat I've never had to follow through on. But the children know me and they know that I would. I've often said to them, you are so blessed to have the mom you have, because Grandma would not put up with that. And they said, oh, Grandma, we know. Grandma's not mean. Grandma's loving. Grandma has them come over. Grandma spoils them. Grandma makes them pancakes in different shapes. Grandma does art with them. And we make such a mess that we do clean up. And sometimes when they leave, I'm ready to just sleep for about 2 weeks. But we have a really good time. The kids are young, but they're smart enough to know that they will have a wonderful time here, and being on their best behavior is a small price to pay for the fun. Basically, what I'm trying to explain here is that when we give our kids a clear expectation and we let them know that we're going to follow through, whether it's discipline or homeschooling or just getting your chores done, they have to know that you mean it and that you're going to follow through. Kids are smart, and as my husband has said, they are also gamblers. They are betting that you're not going to follow through. But I have a track record for following through with their mother, and they've all heard the story. It only takes one time of following through to get the results we'd like to see, and those results are well worth it. I used to always say whenever we disciplined our kids, it hurt us more than it hurt them. And the majority of our disciplining, I would say 99.9%, was taking away something that they wanted to do. While expectation is key, surrounding yourself with like-minded families is so important. We can encourage each other and work together for common goals, but that too can be a bit much. And you have to look at this and evaluate it with each of your families. When the kids were younger, I participated in homeschool co-ops, and these were nothing like some of the schools that you see today where their facilities and the kids homeschool either 2 or 3 days at the facility and then the rest of the time at home, or their hybrid schools. What we did were homeschool co-ops where they were parent-led and parent-taught. So we took turns teaching a specific topic or unit, and we didn't just drop off our kids. We were usually there to help. and facilitate whatever it was that was being taught. Sometimes it may have only been like 2 or 3 of us out of the 8 parents who did this. But I pulled out of all the co-ops when my kids were in the high school years, and the reason is I felt like it was being counterproductive. I was having to put so much work into the co-op that I wasn't putting enough work into our homeschool. I also had another goal in mind. To me, Homeschooling for Excellence was taking a page out of one of my favorite college professors. And one of the things she said to me was, in our class, not just me specifically, but she said, there's only so much I can teach you. I can teach you the things in the book. I can require assignments and papers. I can require you to demonstrate what you've learned. But one of the things I really want you to learn is how to find the information to the answers to your questions. So she taught us to be independent. She taught us to find the solutions, and she taught us how to do this. And I wanted my children to do that as well in the high school years. I wanted them to learn independently and to research without being told what is right and wrong, although we did go through everything and discussed it, and I directed their learning. This independence and direction really helped my college-bound children because they found that their classmates were sheep just wanting to know the right answer without challenging any of the things that their professor was saying. Yes, this can backfire. I have a story for another time. But it's important that your children are independent thinkers. I am going to just briefly say my one daughter who went to college in a really hostile environment, for lack of a better term, and we pulled her out after being there a year. But she found respect from this teacher that she challenged in class. And that was very gratifying for her. It was difficult, but she got this teacher's respect because she was articulate and not hurtful in what she said. And that's the thing. I would love to do a whole series on watching what we say and how we say it. I'm known to be the disciplinarian out of the two of us between my husband and I. He's a way better listener, and I'm, more into, well, what you've heard, setting down the rules, letting people know what I expect. And yes, there's wiggle room. I'm not so regimented. But I have learned through the years that my kids, especially as they get older, will come and tell me that Dad was always the favorite, but that they really respected me and how I stood for things. And that to me is such a blessing. How can we have independent thinkers who are good, wholesome, and honorable people? And it takes a good foundation, friends. For our family, the foundation is a strong biblical foundation. It's an example of godly men and women who live virtuous lives. I cannot tell you the countless books we read about the saints and about people of noble character throughout history. We had open discussions, and my children challenged me. I didn't want them to just, believe everything I told them without having discussion. And my husband and I were both available to our children. Again, that's a blessing. Friends, excellence is what you make it. Stay strong. I invite you to join our podcast family group. I will have a link for that. It's on Facebook. You can share your thoughts with me. You can share your thoughts with me on this blog post as well if you'd like. And I'd love to hear from you. Or you can write to me at Felice@MediaAngels.com. Friends, be encouraged. Just your decision to homeschool was the right decision. Homeschooling is not for everyone, but homeschooling has been such a blessing in our family and in our lives. Take care, everyone. God bless, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks for tuning in to the Vintage Homeschool Mom Show. Visit Felice at MediaAngels.com and TheVintageHomeschoolMoms.com. Vintage Homeschool Moms is a production of the Ultimate Homeschool Radio Network.